Capcom developed and published the 24 megabit Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for the Genesis in 1993, it was a solid product that delivered in every area but the voice work. It combined the arcade hyper fighting and Champion Edition into one product, adding additional speed settings in the process. The graphics were spot on, the music sounded great, and the gameplay was as close to the arcade as 16-bit arcade to home conversions could get. The sole area of concern were the voices, where throwing a projectile or doing any other special move resulted in some garbled samples that didn't sound the best. It was easy to overlook given the quality of the overall product, however, and most Sega fans came away loving it. Hot on the heels of that release, Capcom prepared an update called Super Street Fighter II: The New Challengers, it too based on the arcade title of the same name. It shipped on a massive 40 megabit cart, the largest retail release game during the run of the Genesis. With the extra ROM size and Capcom having nearly an entire extra year of experience with the Genesis hardware, surely all issues we had before were stomped out, and this is quite simply the very best product it could be, right? In this episode, we answer that question, compare it to a few other releases at the time, and even go head to head with the arcade original. Does the Genesis hold its own and prove its worth, or does it fall behind, leaving us wanting more? Let's find out. When Super Street Fighter II was released in the arcade, it underwent numerous balance, presentation, and move changes to the engine. These tweaks and additions were felt across the entire game, from Ken's new flaming uppercut, to combos being counted and called out, a new announcer, new voice samples, new costume color choices, and of course the addition of 4 new fighters. First up is DJ, a Jamaican kickboxer who has incorporated his music and dance style into his martial art. He relies on kicks with impressive reach and a fire-based projectile that gives him excellent flexibility against most opponents. Thunderhawk is a Native American wrestler looking for revenge against Bison for destroying his home. He is a massive figure that is slow, but does impressive damage with a set of moves that allow him to dominate the air and ground against advancing warriors. His Storm Hammer throw can end a match out of the blue. Fei Long is a movie star that is clearly patterned after Bruce Lee. His kung fu moves are fast, and what he lacks in size, he more than makes up for with technique. His Rekka Ken allows him to advance on an enemy quickly, and his Rising Dragon Kick is a great way to knock enemies out of the air. But by far the most popular new addition was Cammy, a British intelligence officer with a very dark past. Her front kick has a Dragon Punch-like counter effect that is quite nice, and her Cannon Drill is a fast-moving low attack that you can just abuse the hell out of. She even has a spinning knuckle move that allows her to get past projectiles unharmed. These 4 new fighters come with the 12 you already know and love so well. That gives this Street Fighter the most options the series has ever seen up until that point. The Genesis port here also has numerous modes to consider when playing. The Super mode is the main game where you'll fight against the CPU, gain victory, and see how the story plays out for your chosen fighter. There is an Expert mode for this that allows you to play every single fighter in the game. Versus mode is pretty self-explanatory. It's here where you can easily battle your friends. After the match is over, it kicks back to the fighter select so you don't miss a beat. It tracks wins and losses, allows you to choose your stage, and you can set up a handicap to help newcomers cope with a disadvantage. The Group Battle mode is a team-based affair where you choose a select group of fighters and take them against a friend. You can choose a by-the-fighter point match setup, or you can do it elimination style, where each fighter fights until they're defeated. Tournament Battle is an up to 8-player match where you fight in a traditional bracket setup to see who's the best of the best. Finally, Challenge Mode is a time or score-based match where you try and beat the CPU under certain conditions. Best part of all this is that there are turbo options available here that even the arcade version didn't have, so the gameplay is even faster. The entire package is an impressive upgrade over the previous release in terms of content and available options.
Round 1, fight! Hadouken! Hadouken!
Along with the changes to the gameplay, Super Street Fighter 2 also sees some changes to the visuals. All the backgrounds see color and art updates that look nice, but the big attraction here are the 4 new stages that come with the new fighters. DJ's beautiful island villa, Cammy's majestic English countryside, Fei Long's colorful and animated garden, and T-Hawk's busy square that's in front of an old Mexican museum. These stages are all based on real-world locations and translate well into Street Fighter's art style. Like before, the fighters are all animated exquisitely and do a very decent job at cloning their arcade counterparts. The sprites are of course smaller and less detailed, but not enough to impact the presentation negatively. Taking a look at a side-by-side with the arcade original, it's clear there is a downgrade in color as well. But you really have to hand it to the Genesis that it nailed the look so well. I mean, each scene, each fighter, each animation does an impressive job of bringing the arcade home in a way that looks authentic and retains enough of the original product that it feels accurate and recognizable. It also compares favorably to the other 16-bit home version on the Super Nintendo, albeit with a few less colors. Side by side, you see the Genesis does an excellent job here as well, proving Sega's console may have been older, but still quite capable in its own right. Let's see a few more stage comparisons to see how it all panned out. The one area where Special Champion Edition really impressed me was its music. It did a great job of replicating the arcade and I was really happy with the end result. You would think that Capcom would take that success and amplify it with the now massive 40 megabit cartridge that Super was on. But alas, this is an audio failure for me on nearly every level imaginable. What was impressive before now sounds tinny, lacks bass, and just comes off like it's on a less capable device. Seriously, almost every single stage has music that sounds significantly worse than the previous game. To add to that utter and complete letdown, the scratchy voices return with no improvement whatsoever. It sounds as if Capcom didn't even attempt to improve their sound driver, and the end result is an audio presentation that disappoints in every conceivable way. I have a few samples for you to see how you feel. The quagmire in recommending Super Street Fighter 2 comes in the fact that this is still an outstanding looking and playing product that sounds like absolute garbage. There is no question Super Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis has the solid looks of a very competent arcade port. The colors pop, the background's detailed, and the animation is as faithful as you could have hoped for, given the power and ROM size differences from the arcade. The gameplay also impresses. You get every move, every throw, every ending for all 16 fighters, and an entire host of modes to use them in. but as much as I want to give this a glowing review and tell you it's a must-own, I still prefer the original Genesis version of Special Champion Edition. While that version lacks the 4 new characters and the nifty new presentation, I have to genuinely say Old Super here truly does sound that bad. Take a moment and play Dhalsim's stage to see just how awful Genesis audio could be. This ear-crushing display is enough to make you turn the game off every time he shows up. And that's the real issue that is so frustrating with Super Street Fighter 2. The game is a straight-up winner in every other way. There is nothing but good things to say about everything else. Capcom nailed the gameplay and visuals, but completely bombed on the audio. This would be one thing if the music in Special Champion Edition had also been terrible, so you had no real expectations beyond that. But that game proved Capcom was capable of great music on the Genesis, so there's just no excuse it ended up terrible here. If you do not care about Street Fighter's audio, ignore all that and enjoy this great 16-bit home port. If you're like me though, you can't help but walk away expecting better out of a machine that was capable of so much more. Another thing worth mentioning about this game is that it came out at a time when Street Fighter began jumping to 32-bit consoles like the 3DO and powerhouse computer platforms like the FM Towns and X68000. These versions were noticeably superior in sound and visuals, making the audio flaws here even more apparent. But like everything else, if you only had access to the Genesis release, you probably didn't care one bit. Having Super Street Fighter 2 at home was all that mattered, and since it plays so well with that Genesis 6-button controller, it was still an absolute blast. But I think it's really important to take note how these later released Genesis titles had shortcomings that were often noted by the gaming press, who would harp on the sound as aggressively as anything I've said here, and even piss on it visually as inferior to the Super Nintendo version. With Sega dropping new platforms so often, and the Genesis getting a bad rep for poor sounding games, it was easy for consumers to abandon the console and the brand for perceived greener pastures. The Genesis was Sega's bread and butter, its lone console to see major success. They should have been working with Capcom closely to make sure the Sega name, the Genesis platform, and the reputation of them both were represented the best possible way. If need be, the Sega Technical Institute should have been put on audio to help Capcom pass any hurdles they faced. Public perception is a hell of a thing, and Sega's rep was taking an absolute beating in the press by this time. By 1994, most of the Best Game Awards were being swallowed up by competitors, and when the system itself was reviewed, it was clearly taking a back seat to Nintendo's 16-bit machine by a wide margin. This plunge in consumer confidence and respect was at a really important time, especially with Saturn so close to its Western debut. Was Super Street Fighter 2 a letdown or a winner for you? Let me know down in the comments.
I don't think there's anyone out there who plays video games who doesn't know what Street Fighter is. It's pretty much the fighting game, and I consider Ryu one of video games' most recognizable icons. It's popular for a reason. Street Fighter essentially opened the floodgates to the entire fighting game genre, and we probably wouldn't have seen games like Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Virtua Fighter, Smash Bros, Guilty Gear, or any fighting game if it wasn't for Street Fighter. So we owe a lot to Street Fighter 2. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be taking a look at the first game in this series because it's a little archaic and not many people actually played it, and also, I don't even know if it had a home release. I think it was on the TurboGrafx 16 and they called it Fighting Street, which, what does that even mean? So, yeah, let's just take a look at 2. Anyway, let's get something else out of the way. This is Super Street Fighter 2. There are many, and I mean many, different versions of Street Fighter 2. Obviously, I can't look at them all, so one version will have to do. Street Fighter 2 released worldwide on February 14th, 1991. After the release, there were many updated versions that released afterwards for a variety of different platforms that added new modes and fighters. I'll be looking at Super Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis. Oh my god, that buzzing sound. I think my cartridge is dying. Is there a story in Street Fighter 2? Yeah. Does it matter? Nah. So, gameplay. In this version of Street Fighter 2, we can play Super Mode, Tournament Mode, Challenge Mode, Versus Mode, Group Mode, and Option Mode. In fact, more than half of the modes in this game are only played with multiple players, and since I'm an internet reviewer, I have no friends unless I bribe them. But from what I can assume, Versus Mode is for 2-player fights, Group Mode is for a group of players to fight with special rules, and Tournament Mode is to play with tournament brackets. Challenge Mode is for single players, and is just fights only you try to beat your opponent in the fastest time, or try to get the highest score. Super Mode is basically arcade mode. You go through matches fighting 12 opponents with the final boss being M. Bison. This sounds incredibly bare bones nowadays, but keep in mind this was the first game to really make this kind of thing popular. A good fighting game needs a good selection of characters to make the fights interesting. In Street Fighter 2, we arguably have the most recognizable roster of fighters of all time. We have Ryu the Original, E Honda the Car, Blanka the Super Saiyan, Guile the Theme, Balrog the Little Mac, Ken the Clone, Chun-Li the Thigh Master, Zangief your worst nightmare, Dhalsim the Fantastic, Sagat the Bob, Vega the Shafted, T-Hawk the Nightwolf, Fei Long the Bruce Lee clone in every fighting game ever, DJ the DG, Cammy da ass, and of course, M. Bison. In comparison to other newer fighting games, is it the best roster? Nah, not really. But I give points for making the roster pretty diverse. The point was trying to get fighters from different countries, hence why it's called the World Warrior. Fighting mechanics in this game are as simple as it gets, unless your name is Dive Kick. There's no super duper moves, there's no crossover combinations, there's no final smashes, it's just you and your opponent. So let's go over what you can do. You can move around with the D-pad, you can jump by pressing up, you can hold back to block, and you have 3 face buttons dedicated to light, medium, and heavy punches, as well as having light, medium, and heavy kicks. But GenesisFrenzy, how could you execute 6 different attacks if there's only 3 buttons on the Genesis pad? Well, to switch between punches and kicks, you need to press the start button. Now, it's not the ideal way to play. If you have a 6-button Genesis pad, that works a lot better, but this is one of the major flaws about this port. On the SNES version, the controller there had more buttons, so you could do all the moves no problem. I think the way Capcom handled less buttons was pretty good, but obviously it's not perfect. And that's sort of it. You can do combos, but since I don't know jack about SF2 combos, I can't demonstrate these well. Also, each character has their own set of moves. The punch and kick seem identical in terms of damage, but you have special moves that you can execute with the direction and face buttons. The most recognizable special is the Hadouken, which is quarter circle forward punch. But every character has their own moves that make them feel unique. It's definitely limited here, being the pioneer and all, but it's serviceable. The graphics for this port are pretty good. Obviously it's not going to stack up to the arcade version, but it holds its own. Sprites are detailed, animations are smooth, it was a nice transition to the Genesis. The only issue in terms of presentation is the sound. Other than my cartridge being on the fritz, the music is meh and has that Genesis twangy thing and overall isn't the highest quality audio. I think the SNES port fared a bit better in this regard, but the Genesis version I'll put at average. The sound effects are alright though. Super Street Fighter 2 holds up in the same way that Super Mario Bros. Holds up. It works, it's functional, it can be enjoyable and nostalgic, but there are better games out there nowadays. Street Fighter 2 certainly set the foundation, but you probably want to spend your time on other games that just have more to offer. I would only recommend going back to Street Fighter 2 for the Turbo Arcade HD Remix thing, Hyper Deluxe Edition something, I'm just adding subtitles, that was released on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade. But this original version here is just a little too bare to keep your interest for very long.
I have a confession to make. I think I like Super Street Fighter 2 on the Sega Genesis better than the Super Nintendo version. I think, maybe, kind of, who knows? Let's find out. So, Super Street Fighter 2 is quite possibly my favorite Street Fighter game. It's either that or Alpha 2. They kind of go back and forth in my mind like a seesaw. But I definitely, between those two, it's kind of a toss up. It's really tough. I love Super Street Fighter 2 though. Street Fighter 2 was awesome, the first one, and I was definitely around for it. But Super wasn't until I really got into it. I really started to care about motions and figuring out how the game played and patterns and all types of stuff. Super Street Fighter was just awesome. Like, you had this cool little intro with Ryu. You had, multiple new colors for the characters. We had 4 brand new characters who were all pretty kick-ass. And then we had, updated endings. The same endings from before, but they got like retouched, remodeled. So that was really awesome. It definitely was kind of like an expansion or just a better version of Street Fighter 2. It showed. That's why I pretty much own Super Street Fighter 2 in like every form. Got it on the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation on the collection, Sega Saturn, obviously ROMs, whatever, you name it. But nothing compares to that first feeling when I played the game. Back when my brother and I first rented it, I mean, we rented that game like crazy. Yes, back when we used to rent games. We probably rented Super Street Fighter 2 like 10 times. It was pretty intense, but we loved it. Obviously, it was a Super Nintendo version, because I'm pretty biased. I'm a Super Nintendo guy. I love the Sega Genesis, but I'm definitely a Super Nintendo guy. I definitely prefer that system over the Genesis. So naturally, we would rent games for the Super Nintendo. So Super Street Fighter 2 was no exception. So we played it, loved it, it's cool, great. And then sometime down the road, obviously, we saw the Sega Genesis version. I remember first seeing it in a magazine, and they were hyping it up and talking about how, it's got more megs, more power, so it's better, closer to the arcade than a Super Nintendo one. And, I'm reading this, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool, interesting, all right. And so I remember we eventually had rented the Sega Genesis version. I kid you not, we rented it for one day, and, well, I should say this, we rented it for 3 days, but we ended up returning it the same day we rented it. Yeah, needless to say, we didn't like it. We felt it was horrible. I remember popping it in and hearing the sound and the music, and it was just so rough and just, sounded awful. I mean, Street Fighter is known mainly for its combat, of course, but also for its catchy tunes, right? Who doesn't want to battle it out to Guile's theme or Ken's theme or Ryu's theme? They're awesome. So you play Street Fighter and all you hear is ding ding, hearing these sounds, pretty much just noise. It was like, I can't do this. And not to mention the visuals, like the color, it was very muted and dull. There were less colors on the screen because obviously the Genesis couldn't put out what the Super Nintendo put out in terms of color, so it also looked worse. I remember looking at some of the characters like Cammy. It was all bad. I mean, we played it and we were just like, no. We returned it the same day and we ended up renting the Super Nintendo one once again. So yeah, for the longest time, Super Nintendo one was far head and shoulders above the Genesis one. You couldn't even compare them in my mind. There was no way. Well, fast forward a couple years. Obviously, I'm a little older now, and I purchased the Genesis one myself, and I played it again. Played it a couple times, and it was like every time I played it, the game kind of got better to me. I started to see things. I still was pro Super Nintendo. I was still all in on that version. But I started to feel like, Genesis one's not too rough, too bad. And then, it wasn't until, I'd say fairly recently, maybe like a year or 2 years ago, started playing the Genesis one again. And it really dawned on me. And I went, the Genesis one actually plays closer to the actual arcade version. If you really play both games, if you want the one that's closest to the arcade experience, believe it or not, it's the Sega Genesis. You know, and I know you're probably thinking, "What? No, wait, how? Wait." No, hear me out. Again, the Super Nintendo one's cool. It's good. Right off the bat, sounds better. Sound effects are crisp, they're clear. The music is much better. Sounds pretty close to the original tunes. The colors are instantly better. Far more colors on the screen. They're less muted, very bright. So it just overall looks better. Looks and sounds better. Alright? But I would argue that's pretty much all the Super Nintendo has over the Genesis, which are good things, but they're kind of more along the cosmetic side of things, if you know what I mean. Where the Genesis one, to me, plays just like the arcade. Like the arcade has a flow and feel to it. The Genesis version is the closest to that version. You know, the Super Nintendo is almost like it's a modified. It's almost like they just did something. They just, you know what, let's put our own thing in there, whatever. Make it play like, you know, Street Fighter 2 remix or whatever the case may be. Just trust me, if you play the arcade one, then go play the Super Nintendo version, you'll notice there's a difference in the way it feels, the way certain combos, and just the whole overall feel of the game. Whereas the Genesis one very much feels like the arcade, you know. Obviously I don't have an arcade here in my home, but luckily I do have that Street Fighter collection that came out on PS4 that also includes the arcade versions of those titles. But it also too got Street Fighter collection on the PS1 and on the Saturn, which they're not arcade perfect, surprisingly, but they're very close to it. And I gotta say, the Genesis version is close to it. Heck, even the sound effects, as bad as they are on the Genesis, as we can hear right now, they're actually closer to the arcade. If you listen to the arcade sound effects and when you land a punch or a kick and it has that crushing sound, right? The Genesis, you can see it attempts to mimic it, and it does actually a pretty decent job. Now obviously the sound quality is not as good, but it still does a decent job of mimicking that crushing blow. Whereas the Super Nintendo version, it's very soft. I can't even explain it. You know, sound. You know, it's not close. It's not the same. Also, the Genesis one, when you beat your opponent, when the round is over, I should say, sorry, and you go to the next round, the music continues to play. Now, yes, the music is crappy on the Genesis, but still, the music does continue just like the arcade version. And then just the overall flow of combat, the timing, the frames, I feel like its Genesis one does an excellent job of actually mimicking what it felt like playing it in the arcades. You know, all this is not to say the Super Nintendo one's bad. I still love it. I still cherish it. But this is just me giving my flowers and props to the Sega Genesis version, which for the longest time I've shunned and said, heck no, put it in the fire. I never want to see it again. It's become a copy I've you know, learned to love. And like I said, it's kind of tough for me. As for now, which one I think is better, you know? And it's tough because I've always thought one was more superior, and now it's kind of like, well, they're kind of even. They both definitely have their pros and cons, but the Genesis one, I don't know. I enjoy playing it. When I put it in, ignoring all the bad audio crap, I enjoy playing it more than the Super Nintendo one. Because again, I feel like I'm playing it how it's supposed to be played. So yeah, it's me kind of just thinking out loud one day and wondering, hey, let me put a video to this, because I'm wondering if other people have the same thought process I do, or always thought the same thing and said, you know what, Super Nintendo one's far superior, I don't want to hear it. And if that's the case, cool. But definitely, I'd say give the Genesis version a shot. Give it a try. It's good. It'll warm up to it if you can just get past the horrible soundtrack. I mean, I just, good lord, the Genesis just was, a lot of their games, some games they had some nice catchy tunes like Streets of Rage or Sonic, and then some games it was just, ugh, you wanted to just cut your ears out. So This is one man's tale, one man's story about how he came to love Super Street Fighter 2 on the Sega Genesis. Wonder what you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed this quick little video. And again, I'll give you more personal stories like this as I will talk about my past, Street Fighter and Capcom, and what these games meant to me. So catch you guys later. Please take care.
A very warm welcome everyone, my name is Nick and we're on the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive and we're looking at Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers published by Capcom in 1994. Now my gameplay is always quite inept at the best of times, but we can at least see how the game plays, what it looks like, so here we go. It's a game I've only sort of like really played on the Commodore Amiga, that's the standard Street Fighter 2 version, and it suffered from just having one button to do all the special moves, which is a bit of a struggle, and it always comes to button mashing with me, so we see how this one plays. The difficulty level I might have to change because I'm going to be hopeless at this one. There's 16 fighters in this one, 4 more than the original Street Fighter, including the Grandmasters Balrog, Vega, Sagarat and M. Bison. Different modes of play, but we'll play the standard one where we take charge of one of the fighters and go around all the world in 12 fighters in a story mode, beat them, and then it unlocks our final story. Who should we pick? Now, I know some of the moves on the Commodore Amiga version, don't know any on this, but as I say, it's all about seeing if you had it as a kid, would you have gone back to it for those last few games. So I'm M. Bison, he's one of the end of level bosses, so must be good, and he's fighting Noel Fielding. No, some Bruce Lee lookalike anyway, which the Tekken did a version of him as well, like Forrest Law they called him there. See our energy bars up the top. I'm trying to muck about with buttons A, B and C, see if I can button mash some crazy special moves, but nothing's going very well. But animation is good, sound is good, and I do love the colourful backgrounds. Right, come on. Best Street Fighter version I've played so far. It'd have to be on the Game Boy Advance. Haven't played any. Oh, I did say it there. I haven't played any of the Nintendo ones. But yeah, I'm getting the hang of this. So it's much better than the Commodore Amiga version immediately. My gameplay is horrendous. My energy bar is quite low. So as suspected, I think I'm going to get beat and put it on an easiest mode. But it's always the best of 3 matches. You must win the best, well, you must win 2 fights to progress to the next round. Yeah, he's KO'd me. Curses. And he's probably going to taunt me as well. There he is, doing his thing. Ow! Look, lovely animated backgrounds here. So, he's 1 up. I could still do it if I win the next 2 fights. Come on, M. Bison. Or M. Is that how you pronounce it? M. Bison? Well, that's how I'm going to pronounce it. There's a time ticking down in the middle as well, although you can turn that off. If the time ticks down to 0, it's whoever's got the most energy left is the winner. Oh, excellent. Good move, Nick. Now, with a bit of practice, I can tell you could get quite good at this. There's a combination of doing back, forward, hold for 2 seconds, buttons A, B and C. We'll try a few other characters if I get knocked out soon to just see what it's about. But there's quite a lot here to keep you going. 12 characters to master. Tournament modes, competitor modes, challenger modes, it's all here. So a very good game, I would say, if you're into fighters. Capcom 1994, the new challengers. And this is one of the new characters, this Fei Long person. Fei Long, or Fei Long. Fei Long pastry. Yes, there he is, constipated I think. Right. You must learn to block or my speed will always get the better of you. Continue? No. So, what character should we go for? Should we go for Ken? Should we go for Ryu? Should we go for Blanca? Or E. Honda? Or Chun-Li even with her amazing upside down bicycle kick? Right, that's the end of him. Good, good, good. With the Amiga version, the original Street Fighter 2, there was 4 discs. No problem with this because it's all cartridge. Well, that's good. Right. So, Super Tournament Challenge, Group and Versus. Let's get the options. Give myself half a chance because it appears that I'm hopeless without any practice. So, difficulty on baby mode. Different styles of play. There's A, B and C buttons you can see there. We'll do the same thing again on the Super Tournament mode and we'll just try and, yes, go around the world again. Been around the world and I can find my baby. E. Honda, the Japanese sumo supremo, and he's fighting another one of the new characters called Cammy from Great Britain or England. Right, here we go. Right, different background with each fighter, slightly different music as well. Their fighting is not so good on baby mode, but they should still give me a bit of a challenge as I try and do some special moves. And this is all going a bit pants again. Oh, come on, Cammy. Let's... Oh, dear. Now, if you've completed this on the hardest mode, let me know, because it does take a bit of practice, but well worth persevering with, because it does reward you. That's a close attack you can do. That was a bear hug. E-Honda can do a super power slap. Let's try and work out how to do that before the review's over. And also he can do like that. Oh, well done, good. Not sure how I did that, but a good move to finish her off with, as a bird flies out my costume. Yeah, so a flying headbutt thing and the super slap, and he can jump in the air and land on in a sitting position. Points for combo attacks, if you can grab a few of those together. But lots of tactics here, rather than just by my button mashing. So if you have got this game or do purchase it, do partake in the time, because you get a much better experience rather than pressing just odd buttons like me, where I'm just trying to show you how it plays to get a vague idea of the game. And it's probably one of the best fighters out there. I've got a few on the list to look at as well. A Clay Fighter is one, Fatal Fury I think was that another one, but there are quite a few to look at, and we will have a look at those in the coming months, I'm sure. That's the end of you, Cammy. Boom. Right, so 2 stars on the top left. You see I'm making short work of her, and it's on to the next person. She doesn't look very attractive anymore. Can't you do better than that? So as you can see on the question marks, 12 fights and then we're complete. It all ends, I think, with the end of level super bosses. Like Bison I weren't very good before. Now Zangief, he is a Russian fighter. He can do a super spin and a power driver. And he can do some lightning attack. So a top Russian wrestler, but I've thrown him there. Now this is in the balance. Energy levels looking quite similar to each other. He's backing off. Now some of the scenery you can interact with on some scenes. I think we must be in some sort of nuclear power plant here. Right, one more punch and he's doomed. There's the power slap. Oh, is it a power plant or is it just... Oh dear, look at that. That was close. And he's beaten me with a spinning pile driver. Colourful characters on this one. Moves quite fast. Frame rate is of an era. If you played it in the arcades, this would have been quite good to have too. Not sure what the reviews like at the time, but I expect they were quite good. Street Fighter 2 is the classic fighter. You ask anyone to name a fighter, they're probably going to say Street Fighter. Bear hug, right, let's make short work of him. So we've levelled it at 1-all. Not sure what that switch does, to be fair. The characters are individual, they've all got their special moves, and there's a number of moves they share, like punches and kicks, but do it in their own inanimate style. It's a classic game, isn't it, really? So each fighter has got their home area. You can see the Russian symbol there on the floor of this one. Oh, he went for a spin there, but it's all about knowing when to block, when to go for your special move, because quite often when you go for your special move and you do it at the wrong time, it does leave you vulnerable. There's a chain there, one that's connected to anything. So it's not as gory as Mortal Kombat, but it doesn't aim to be. It's more cartoony, this one. The shadows are always the same underneath the character, no matter how high you are up the screen. A good character to have in this is Dal Sim. He's like an Indian rubber man, but we've all got our favourite characters. Ken and Ryu are essentially the same, but skin slightly different. That's the end of him. Can't you do better than that? So this won't be a complete walkthrough. We won't keep completing it. We'll just play a few characters and then we're there. I think DJ is another one of the 4 new characters also. He's a kickboxer. I think Bullrog's a boxer as well, one of the end bosses. It'll be interesting to see DJ versus him. That's a 2-hit combo there we just landed. It gives you a bio of all the characters there, when their date of birth was, so a lot of these characters will be getting on a bit. Honda might be 60 years old, but he looks good on it, doesn't he, really? Later was to come the Dead or Alive series and the Tekken series 2, which was heavily influenced by this one, as a lot of others were. I don't think Tekken did come out on the Sega system. If you know different, then let me know. If you've got a favourite fighter you want me to cover, then drop it in below if I haven't already mentioned it. Always like hearing from you. As I say, this system wasn't one I owned back in the day. I'm only coming to it quite late because people requested it quite a lot, so I thought we'd take at least a look at them. I do tend to favour the driving games. Other games I tend to struggle with a little bit, but you know, it's all a part of the charm of the channel, eh? Maybe, possibly, perhaps. Yeah, keep playing, Nick, keep playing. Now, there's some guitar player. The rest of his band don't seem to be moving at all. There's some disco dancers behind us there and a girl waving her dress about. Maybe she's trying to put out a fire or something. But who knows? Everyone is exciting. Everyone is singing. E Honda. Now, I think we're in Jamaica, perhaps. And he's bought me. That was a close one. So it's 1-all. Boo. Right, fighting again. I don't know what that dancing is called behind me there. I think I've seen people on fire move better than that. That's a quote from the cat out of Red Dwarf. Come on, Honda. Bear hug, bear hug, bear hug. Yes, on this beginner mode, it's probably best just to walk into them and do your stuff because their reaction is quite slow. If you back off and give them time to think of stuff, then that's that. DJ. DJ's on the dance floor where he's pretty much sparkoed out there. Did you have this one back in the day? Let me know. Are there any other versions of Street Fighter also on this system or anywhere else? Right, okay. Periodically you have these special stages. This one you have to destroy a car in a limited amount of time and you get awarded points depending on how much damage you've done. You might have to jump from side to side to get it to do stuff. I think we've hit our limit on this side and wasted quite a lot of time. So is it going to... There we go. So now it's falling apart a little bit now. Need to go back round the other side ideally. I think we're going to run out of time. Oh yeah, see. I was a bit slow jumping from side to side there, but we did quite good damage. I think when the person comes back from the shops, they will notice that the car's slightly damaged. Got a few scratches on it. Another new character, Fork. Or Hawk with a T. Is it a silent T? Yeah, we're in some sort of Aztec place, and he's a huge character. Bearing in mind, E Honda is a sumo wrestler, and they aren't noted for their smallness. You certainly need to eat a lot of pies or a lot of rice to become a sumo wrestler. This guy could cause some trouble here. So it's a single player, although you can do 2-player as well. Do have a look at the other modes if you get bored of one mode. Challenge mode, you have to survive as long as possible. Here, I think it's like based on stories here. Check out the animation in the background as well. Some guy beating on a... Well, I say beating on a drum. He's beating on his legs, hasn't he? Perhaps there's been cutbacks in Aztec times and that to sell the drum. They did a similar thing to Brexit, maybe, and left South America, and it's all gone wrong. Tough luck, but it's certainly gone wrong for T-Hawk, I can tell you that much. He's a very, very, very tall fellow. He knees me in the plexus. Right, okay, so we got half a bar left. He's got a full bar. We need to get a few hits. If I can get my special move or special lunge thing, that would be great. Slowly getting it back. Oh, my wordness. 73 seconds left. It isn't going to go the distance, I don't think, this one. Come on, walk into my hands. Good. What is your favourite character to control on Street Fighter 2? Let me know there. I should have gone for Chun-Li. She's a bit of a cutie. But don't let that deceive you. Oh, I've died. Don't let that deceive you. She's got thunder fires with extreme power. Extreme power. Right, 1-all. Here we go. Right. I don't know what those things are behind me there. Are they like insects or birds or... I don't know what they are. Some weird insecty animals there in that marketplace. Right, this is in the balance again. He's slightly winning. It could be game over quite soon here. Oh, man. Cool. What sort of move was that? Right, I think he's going to win. Yeah, he only needs to hit me one more time and I'm done for. Need a lot of luck here. Good. Yes, cool. That was close. I thought I was going to get doomed here. Background does seem to be staggered, so the far side moves a bit different to the fore side, making a bit of a gap. Can't you do better than that, T-Hawk? Right, this will be the... I think we'll probably call it a... No, let's do one more fight. It's Gwil. Or Guile, or Guile. Is it Guile? Guile or Gwil? I'll call him Guile. We're at an air base. I think he's an American. And he can fire stuff at us called a sonic boom, which he'll announce what it's called each time. There you go, he just announced it. Sonic boom! Sonic boom! There's a game on the Commodore Amiga called Sonic Boom. It's a vertical shooter and it's not very good. Maybe he's a fan of that. It's a bit bland. It's okay. Check it out if you want. Sonic Boom. It's just that the music doesn't go with a battle scene at all. It's miles too calm. It certainly doesn't go with E Honda fighting someone on in a US airbase anyway. That girl's going crazy. Maybe she wants to escape that bloke. He's got an iron grip, but Guile is dead. Well, we're 1-0 up. He's still alive, actually. He's got camouflage on, but we can still see him, so that camouflage has not worked whatsoever. This is Battle 5. Boof. Boof. Oh. I mean, set it on the highest difficulty level, and they'll be doing special skills and special moves all over the place, blocking everything, and it then turns into like a game of chess in sort of like fighting form. This is just giving me a bit of a chance. With these sort of skills, as I demolish the scenery, with these sort of skills I wouldn't progress very far at all. You won't complete this on your first go. You need to put in the hours. There's no quick way of cheating here. What's that bloke doing? I don't know. He's trying to put a hole in his trousers. I think we will leave that one there. We've seen enough of the gameplay. Looks like we're going to see Ken next, again in the USA, with his lovely long blonde hair. So I hope you liked having a look at that one. We'll let Ken get the better of us here at the harbour. So that was Super Street Fighter 2 on the Sega Genesis on Mega Drive. The new Challengers, to give it its full name, published by Capcom in 1994. Got any comments about this game, similar games, or anything retro, then please put that below. You're always more than welcome. Huge thank you to everyone that's subscribed so far. If you want to help the channel a bit more, there's patreon.com/Njenkin. Have a look at that site when you get a chance, see what it's all about. Until next time, take great care of yourself and a very fond goodbye.
What's happening, guys? My name is Cheesewagon, and today I review Super Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis. Super Street Fighter 2 returns with the 12 previous characters from Street Fighter 2, having their basic and special techniques adjusted for balance. Super Street Fighter 2 expands the fighting franchise with 4 new characters. They are T-Hawk, an indigenous warrior from Mexico, Cammy, a 19-year-old female Special Forces agent from England, or United Kingdom, Fei Long, a Hong Kong movie star who pretty much almost looks like Bruce Lee. I mean, look at it. Don't you think he looks like Bruce Lee? And finally, DJ, a kickboxing musician from Jamaica. As in the previous games, the player fought against 8 initial opponents, followed by the 4 Grandmaster characters, aka Balrog, Vega, Sagat, and then Bison. The game features new graphics, a new heads-up display or HUD, and face artwork for the fighters. Another feature was a new intro featuring Ryu launching a Hadouken projectile towards the screen. Some characters have new animations as well as new victory poses. Super Street Fighter 2 features a new scoring system where it keeps track of combos, attacks, recoveries, and reversals. Instead of having a few color schemes, you are now allowed to choose between 8 color schemes, depending on which button you pressed. In addition to the standard single and 2-player game modes, Super Street Fighter 2 also features an exclusive 8-player single elimination tournament mode dubbed Tournament Battle. It consists of 3 rounds: the initial eliminations, the semifinals, and then finals. Whoever wins the finals basically wins the tournament and is champion of the tournament. For the Sega Genesis, the player could go to the options menu and choose to play the Super Battle mode on normal or expert. The amount of characters that could be chosen increased from the original 12 to now 16. Overall, Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis is a fantastic fighting game that any person can pick up a controller and start to play. Thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you wish to help me out, all you gotta do is hit that subscriber button above or below the video. Pretty simple, pretty much. Before I go, I have a few questions for you. Out of all the fighters in the franchise, who is your personal favorite and why? And who are you best with? Please respond to the comment section down below. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm here. I'm not that angry.
Really? You're gamer rage alone.
What about you? One time he got so angry at me, he ran off a cliff.
Watch this. Hey, it's been a while. How's Eric?
Don't ask about Eric!
Yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry that I'm less popular than this guy.
Well, yeah, because you copied me.
We had the same teacher. Of course we have the same moves. I should be just as popular.
That's because I had a much harder life. I didn't have mommy and daddy around to pay for everything.
Now the truth comes out. I knew you always resented me for being rich.
I don't resent you because you're rich. I resent you because you got a cool Fire Dragon Punch upgrade. And what did old Ryu get? I got a Fire Hadouken. But that's what the Hadouken is, Ken. It is fire. You don't need more fire.
I'm mad because I had to cut my hair. They stopped making my continuous spray Aquanet. Now it's just a pump. Something about the ozone layer, they said. I'll tell you what, I've flown right by that thing. Looks fine to me. I am mad because I lost my mask. I got this off a guy in the sewer. It smells a little weird. And also, my beautiful hair gets in the way of my perfect eyes.
Well, I'm mad for a good reason. I'm the only one here with a solo movie, and it's complete garbage. Plus, this guy killed my father.
What? I already apologized for that.
You don't even remember anything about it.
That's not true. Not true. It was on a Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday. As someone raised by wild animals, Blanca mad for a different reason. In jungle, Blanca used to go to bathroom anywhere. Now, toilets make Blanca so mad.
Hey, can I have a pretzel?
No.
Come on, just give me a pretzel.
No, you should have brought your own. Just give me a pretzel.
USA! USA! Yeah! It's tiny, but it's there! What do you guys think of this one? He's terrifying, yes, but not in like the scary way, more like creepy, weird guy kind of way.
The best portrayal of me in a movie was Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan.
Blanca, mighty warrior! No one should tell Blanca where to poop. Silence! I have a real reason to be mad. We need new fighters for this year's tournament, and tryouts are this weekend. Oh, it's going to be a nightmare. Tryouts for Street Fighter.
This weekend?
We're in! I am such a big Street Fighter fan. I used to play Super Street Fighter 2 all the time. For the Sega Genesis.
Me too. But it was much better for the Super Nintendo.
What? That's it!
It's Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the galactic center of the Milky Way, 4 million times the mass of the Sun, and approximately 26,000 light years from Earth? Yes!
Best Super Street Fighter 2 game.
Those controllers aren't even plugged in.
Yeah, maybe they'll go home now. Oh no, Blanca! No, don't go in the corner! Use the toilet!
Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers, was released for the arcades in 1993. Developed and published by Capcom, it's the fourth game in the Street Fighter 2 sub-series.
The games were ported to the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis in 1994. While the games seem identical at first, there are differences. Which game's better? Let's find out.
Both games look very similar.
Practically identical.
Graphically, these games look the way you'd expect. All the characters look the same, just like they did in the previous Street Fighter 2 iterations. They can have multiple colored outfits too. The character animations are also pretty much the same. The new characters are the biggest additions, and they look the same in both games as well.
Not only the characters, but the levels are pretty much identical too. Even the new ones. The biggest difference look-wise is this bonus stage. Again, putting them side by side, it's tough to tell which game is which. Can you tell the difference?
They look the same at first.
Right. at first, but my game has a better use of color.
Check out the background characters on Blanca stage. They got white shirts on Super Nintendo. On Sega, the shirts are just kind of the same color as the deck. Now check out T-Hawk stage. The sky on Super Nintendo has a gradient effect. In Sega, just one color.
Okay, those aren't great, but overall, I think the Sega game does have better use of color.
Everything is brighter on Sega. The characters just pop more. Super Nintendo colors are more muted, a bit toned down. Give me the pop of the Sega game any day.
My game also has things that yours doesn't.
On Chun-Li's stage, the Sega game can have multiple bicyclists at once. On Super Nintendo, you only have one at a time. On DJ stage, I have 2 gazebos in the background. Super Nintendo only has 1. On T-Hawk stage, the birds on Sega have shadows. On Super Nintendo, no shadows.
Whoa, your game is definitely missing more than mine.
On DJ stage, Super Nintendo might be missing a gazebo, but I have people by mine, and Sega has none. On Ryu stage, the moon and clouds scroll on Super Nintendo. They don't move at all on Sega. On Blanca stage, the clouds scroll behind the houses when you move on Super Nintendo. On Sega, it doesn't scroll. On Vega stage, the flickering lights are more obvious on Super Nintendo. They barely flicker on Sega. On Kami stage, the lake has a flicker on Super Nintendo. On Sega, no flicker, just blue. And on Balrog stage, the words on the golden nugget sign read Goldwyn. It's much better than the Sega, which says Nin Nin Hall? That makes no sense, unless 9 Inch Nails are playing there.
Plus, the Super Nintendo has more detail than Sega.
Look at Guile stage. See that yellow line? On Sega, that's just what it is, a yellow line. On Super Nintendo, you see some texture there to make it look like it's actually on concrete. And look at the sunset on DJ's stage. It definitely looks more authentic on Super Nintendo. Now look at Kami's stage. On Super Nintendo, the mountains have a lot more detail. There's also a blue haze behind them too. They look a lot simpler on Sega.
They're close, but Super Nintendo looks slightly better.
For some better use of color, having things missing from the Sega game, and having finer detail overall, best graphics go to Super Nintendo.
Round 1, fight!
No, 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 no! Coward!
Just like graphics, presentation's pretty much the same.
Both games open with Ryu getting ready to Hadouken you. That's followed by player profiles and a demo reel. Character select looks the same, post-fight trash talk looks the same, the planes flying between fights looks the same, and both games have endings for each character. Very similar presentation.
But there are some differences.
Right. Super Nintendo's better. Let's check out the Versus mode.
After a fight in Versus mode, you see the results. On Super Nintendo, you see the profile pictures in the background. On Sega, no pictures, just the stats.
That's it? My presentation's so much better than yours.
How?
Well, for one, my game's not censored.
Just like Super Nintendo censors blood in the first Mortal Kombat, they censor it here too. Look at the post-battle trash talk. On Sega, the defeated fighter is covered with blood. Blood! The Super Nintendo game has sweat. That's so lame. The blood looks so much better. Some characters even look fine, like Blanca. If you want blood, you got it on Sega Genesis.
Who needs blood? Nothing wrong with little white stuff on their faces.
Are you sure that
I know what I said.
Okay, fine. But it's not just the blood. Sega also has better endings.
Some of the endings are the same in both games. But some endings are quite a bit different. Check out Chun-Li. On Super Nintendo, she has a speech for her dad right at M. Bison's stage. It's okay, I guess. On Sega, she says the same thing, but at a cemetery. Makes a lot more sense. And it shows more effort since it's not just in-game graphics. You get a newly drawn cutscene on Sega. And this happens for quite a few characters. Super Nintendo will have a cutscene right at M. Bison's stage, while Sega will have an exclusive picture. The Super Nintendo game never has one. Now take a look at the intros really quick. When you slow it down, you can see the Sega game has more frames of animation.
They seem very similar, but the Sega game definitely has better presentation.
For not censoring the blood of the defeated warrior, and for having more effort in the endings, best presentation goes to Sega Genesis.
Round 1, fight!
Oh, carry on about your fight. I'm just here to take a bath is all. I'm just gonna get... Uh-oh.
Whoa! Good for you, man.
Both these games have all the same songs, composed by Noritaka Funimizu and Hiro Murata.
Right, but I think we can both agree the music sounds better on Super Nintendo.
Not agreed!
Music on Super Nintendo has much better instrumentation.
The simple electronic instrumentation on Sega sounds better to me.
The Super Nintendo music sounds much better. The Sega music has an annoying whistle sound.
The bass on Sega sounds excellent.
You pulling my chain? My music is definitely better.
Well, this song is definitely better on Sega. Listen to the options menu on Sega. Now listen on Super Nintendo. That's right, no music in the options menu. It also plays during the key configuration. But not on Super Nintendo.
So I'm missing one song. Let's compare voiceovers. Yours are super distorted.
So are yours.
See? Mine are much clearer.
That's because your music stops in between the matches. When a match ends on Sega, the music keeps going until the next round.
Round 2, fight!
On Super Nintendo, it stops. Kinda brings the action to a halt.
So it stops. Everything still sounds better on Super Nintendo.
Well, what about the fact that you're missing voiceovers? Listen when you start a match on Sega.
Round 1, fight!
That's pretty standard, right? Now listen to Super Nintendo. No voiceovers. No one telling me what round it is. No one telling me to fight. That's absurd! You also hear voiceovers during character bios. On Sega, you hear the characters' names.
Honda!
On Super Nintendo, you don't. Plus, listen when you hit pause. Here's Super Nintendo. That was nice, but now listen to Sega. That's much cooler.
I still think my sound is better.
But my sound is complete, and that kind of gives my game the edge. With some excellent electronic tracks, one exclusive track, a cool pause sound, and having more voiceovers.
Round 1, fight!
Best sound goes to Sega Genesis.
Round 1, fight!
Who are you?
Ow! It hurts so bad! It's not that kind of game!
Now our gameplay is pretty much the same.
Almost identical.
Both versions play like typical fighting games. You have 16 fighters to choose from. Each can do light, medium, and hard punches and kicks. Each fighter has their own set of special moves. Matches are best 2 out of 3.
The main mode in both games is the Super Battle. Pick one fighter and fight all the way to the boss, M. Bison. Each fighter has their own ending. If you lose a match, you can switch fighters without losing progress. A second player can also join at any time. And this mode has unlimited continues.
9. Hadouken!
There's Group Battle. Here you can do match play or elimination. They play almost the same. Essentially, you and a friend pick up to 8 players each. The difference is, elimination lets you keep playing as the same player if you keep winning. Match play has player 1's first pick fight player 2's first pick, player 1's second pick fight player 2's second pick, and so on.
There's also the tournament mode. Here, 8 fighters get selected. This bracket competition has people fight one-round battles multiple times. It's over when one person is on top. Tournament champion.
There's Time Challenge. It's pretty simple. Just beat the computer as fast as you can.
And last but not least, Versus mode. Good old one-on-one matches. And to keep track of your wins and losses.
How are we gonna do this? The gameplay is pretty much the same.
Not exactly the same. One of my modes is a little more elaborate than yours.
Both games have group battle mode. Both games have elimination as one of those modes. The other mode is match play on Super Nintendo and point match on Sega. The difference is points. The Sega game uses a point system to determine the winner. You get 8 points for beating your opponent, and every second left on the clock is 1 point each. The team with the most points when all the matches are over is the winner. The Super Nintendo is a bit simpler. There are no points. The winner is based upon who wins more matches. That's fine, but the Sega game's point system brings in strategy. You can win more matches, but if your opponent wins their matches faster, they can possibly pull an upset. This mode is just much more interesting on Sega.
A slight tweak to a mode I have. Big deal.
You want a big deal? How's about the fact that the Sega game has an exclusive mode?
In addition to the time challenge, the Sega game has an exclusive score challenge. This is a challenge where you try to rack up a high score against a computer opponent, usually by using multiple combos. And again, this mode is exclusive to the Sega Genesis.
Those are hardly enough to win.
But when both games are identical, any exclusive gives that game an edge.
But an extra mode and a point system?
Okay, fine. How's about this? Back to the Super mode.
In Super mode, you don't actually fight all the fighters. There's 16 total, but the Super mode only has you play 12 opponents, in both games. However, on Sega, there's a way to play all 16. In the options menu, you have Super mode options. Normal has you fight 12 opponents. Expert has you fight all 16. And this ability to pick super modes is available only on the Sega Genesis.
Just from those 3 things, you think your gameplay is better?
Maybe you're right. Actually, one more thing.
Both games let you pick a turbo speed before getting into the game menu. The Super Nintendo game lets you go up to 3 stars for your speed. The Sega Genesis game, 4 stars. That's 1 star better.
It may not seem fair, but when both games are identical, every exclusive that the Sega game has gives it an edge.
For having points in the group battle mode, an exclusive score challenge mode, for having the option to fight all 16 fighters, and 1 extra speed for turbo mode, best gameplay goes to Sega Genesis.
You win!
Both games are almost identical, but at the end of the day, one is better, and that version is Super Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis.
It may not have a lot of detail, but it has excellent colors that pop. It has better presentation with no censorship and more pictures during the endings. It has better sound with a solid electronic soundtrack, one more song, cool pause sound, and more voiceovers, even if they are more distorted.
Round 1, fight!
And it has better gameplay, with points in the group battle, score challenge mode, the ability to fight all 16 characters, and 1 extra speed for turbo mode. The Super Nintendo version is a fine game. Most people may prefer that because they think it looks and sounds better. But when comparing these 2 almost identical games, the Super Nintendo seems to have less and less. When you observe them closely, the Super Nintendo version really starts to seem incomplete. Since both play the same, the game with more is going to have an edge, and that version is the one on Sega. Best Super Street Fighter 2 goes to Sega Genesis.
You ready to audition for some Street Fighter?
Oh, as ready as I'm gonna be.
Oh yeah, let's do this! Go do some fighting on the street!
can't wait to see who they have me fight. They don't stand a chance.
I know everybody's moves. I can dodge anything. Welcome to this year's tryouts. All of our contestants will now do the bonus stages. I just focused on fighting people. I don't know if I can do this.
I guess just use the super moves. How hard can it be? Oh! Oh! Ow! 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 Ow!
How am I gonna do this? Yeah, that'll work. Oh! Oh, so heavy!
Oh! 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 No! Oh, I hope Sega's feeling better.
Now we have the results for Nintendo and Sega. You two did really bad. Really, really bad. But you fought with a lot of spirit. We're putting you in the game. Yes! Yes! Yeah! 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 Dude, we did it! We're finally in a Street Fighter game!
Best day of my life!
Just wish we could have been playable characters, you know, instead of just in the background.
Yeah! Maybe if we move really fast, they'll let us fight.
Yeah! Hey! Can you guys stop it?
Yeah, it's really distracting.
Man, they yelled at us.
Whatever, my arm's getting tired anyway.
Stupid jerks.
I wonder if they have beer here.
You know, I saw some vodka in Zangief stage. Wanna go check that out?
Yes.
Alright, let's go.
Just keep doing the
Yeah,
motion.
just keep going.
Yeah.
No one notice.
No, yep.
If you're a fan of Street Fighter 2 back in the day, then Super Street Fighter 2 would widen your eyes. In the arcades, I remember seeing this intro screen and being blown away of how impressive this looked. But is there that much to get excited about? These games are hard to improve on because it's a standard one-on-one fighting game, and big improvements have to be made to get people interested. You get 4 new fighters, and they are Cammy, T-Hawk, Fei Long, and DJ. Cammy is a Special Forces agent with a past connecting to Bison. I recommend watching the Street Fighter 2 movie for a backstory. And I mean the manga film, not the shitty live-action Street Fighter. T-Hawk is a Mexican warrior who also has a vendetta against Bison. Fei Long is a movie star who wants to use his skills for real. Yes, he's just a Bruce Lee ripoff. And there's DJ, a kickboxing musician from Jamaica. Personally, I never use any of these characters, as I find them hard to use. Mainly because I grew up using Ken or Ryu, so I was used to their moveset. Cammy controls quite well, with similar controls to Ryu. Not a bad character, and probably the easiest of the 4 to control. T-Hawk is a big lump just like Zangief, and I found it impossible to get anywhere with him. He moves too slow, and his special attacks are a pain in the ass. Like most characters, their special moves are either vertical or horizontal, but his are diagonal, which means your timing has to be precise to get a successful hit in. Fei Long is a quick character with vertical and horizontal moves, but only 2 to play with here, and they aren't that impressive. DJ is a mid-range character with similar special control inputs as Guile. Not a bad character overall, but not one I'd go back to. All the other characters from previous games are here with minor upgrades. Ken's Dragon Punch has fire when he attacks, and Ryu can perform an orange fireball in his Hadouken. Zangief has the Atomic Buster, and Bison has the Devil's Reverse. What looks really nice is the upgraded avatars of the fighters. They have gone from okay to fierce. Even the beaten faces look 10 times better. The stage scenery hasn't changed much, and the new stages have been toned down a bit compared to the arcade. Cammy's stage hasn't got much details in the Northern Lights. E-Honda's stage doesn't have flowing water, and parallax effects have been removed in some stages. The music is okay and sound effects are just as bad as Champion Edition. Guile has a new Sonic Boom vocal which doesn't sound right. The sounds of Ryu and Ken's special attacks sound as broken as before. There are custom ROM patches out there for anyone who wants to listen to how it should sound, and graphical enhancements so it's not as painful on the eyes. As for controls, I found them to be fine, but if you're still using a 3-button pad, then you're going to have some fun using the start button to switch between punch and kick. This also becomes a bastard when you need to pause it, and you can't. There are other modes you can play, such as Tournament, Challenge, Versus and Group. I really didn't see the point in any of these additional modes other than Versus, unless you have loads of friends around. It's only a point scoring challenge or elimination matches that I don't remember anyone talking about when this was released. This isn't a bad game for the Mega Drive, but I do think they cut corners. It's been proved that better sound and visuals were possible, and maybe if they focused on that instead of the extra content, it could have been a better game. The Super Nintendo stood above the Mega Drive versions previously and still does with this game. If it's a decent version you're after, then I'd recommend the Arcade Edition, which can be found on the 30th Anniversary Collection for modern systems.
Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers for the Sega Genesis. And this is not a review by any means of Super Street Fighter 2, because I've already shown Super Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo. And, I wasn't a fan of the 4 new characters. A lot of people I know don't really care for the 4 added characters and the 4 added levels in Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers. But overall, it's still a good game. And, if you're only going to own one of the Street Fighter 2 games, you could argue why not, have the one that has the most characters and the most levels in it. So here I just wanted to show the Sega Genesis version for people who haven't seen the Sega Genesis version. Maybe some of you didn't realize this game was also on the Sega Genesis, because there's really only 2 Street Fighter 2 games on the Sega Genesis. This game came out for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo in June of 1994. All 3 major regions got Super Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis on the same day. But there's surprisingly some differences. On the Super Nintendo, Super Street Fighter 2 uses a 32 megabit cartridge, and on the Sega Genesis, it uses a 40 megabit cartridge. So there's actually a few extra voice clips in the Sega Genesis version. In the Genesis version, you have an announcer who says the name of the country, and when you start the fight, he'll say round 1 fight or round 2 fight, and that's not in the Super Nintendo version. So there are extra voice samples in the Genesis version. Now overall, these 2 ports of the arcade version are very close. The graphics are a little bit better on the Super Nintendo, I will not deny that, and in some cases they're so close you probably wouldn't even notice the differences unless someone actually pointed them out to you, and that's the case with me. I played the Super Nintendo version, and then, a few months later I saw the Sega Genesis version, and to me I was like, they look exactly the same. There are some subtle differences. Sometimes the levels have extra parallax layer of scrolling. Sometimes they have just a little bit extra animation in the backgrounds. On the Super Nintendo version, obviously better colors sometimes in the backgrounds. But that said, they did a very, very good job on the Genesis. And other than that, the music is kind of hit or miss. Because the Sega Genesis used a similar Yamaha FM chip as the Capcom arcade boards at the time, the music in the Genesis version is more or less a direct port. Whereas on the Super Nintendo, they basically had to rewrite all of the music for the sample-based system of the Super Nintendo. And because of that, you can argue that the Super Nintendo versions sounds a little bit more dynamic, but the Sega Genesis version probably is a little bit more true to how the arcade music sounded. So I can kind of see how people would like both. That said, however, I know that a lot of Sega Genesis fans prefer the music in Street Fighter II Champion Edition over Super Street Fighter II, and in some cases they prefer the color palettes used in some of the levels where it was changed. Basically, a lot of Sega Genesis fans prefer Street Fighter II Champion Edition over Super Street Fighter II, despite the fact it has less characters. And I'm one that sort of leans towards that choice. I think Super Street Fighter II is pretty good for what they pulled off on the Genesis, but if you don't want the extra 4 characters, I say Street Fighter II Champion Edition is better on the Genesis and is easier to find and will cost you a lot less.
Okay, YouTube, this is JLChambers82, back again. Still got the Genesis out, the Sega Genesis Model 1, and just showed you Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for Sega Genesis. Great Street Fighter game. Thought I'd go ahead and show this one off too. This is Super Street Fighter II. Now this is not the Turbo Edition or anything, this is just the standard. Now, and this game was ported to both systems. This was ported at the same time to Super Nintendo, so I never played it on Super Nintendo. I played it in the arcade, and then I had the 3DO. So I never actually had it for the 16-bit console at all. So I really couldn't tell you which one's better. But I got this one. I bought it off online not too long ago. Good price. Again, I think this might have been $8 shipping with cartridge box and manual. So can't beat that. Really dig collecting stuff for Genesis because everything just so mint. Those boxes, the plastic ones, I mean, they kept everything, perfect, so well preserved. So, yeah, right away they crammed a lot on this cart. So the graphics are pretty good. I think the Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition might have better colors and everything in the background, sharper characters. These character animations were kind of redone for this game in general, but the sound effects, yeah, definitely the voicing in this game. Maybe it's just the Genesis version, but it's not all that great. So sometimes Vega's voice, for example, is comical. But yeah, I mean this game. I remember playing it in the arcade and having all the other characters available and everything, and I always still stuck with the same old people, Ken or Ryu, or I was cheap. I liked being Bison a lot. But in the more and more I played, later on, I try to stick with the basic characters and everything. I'm not doing so hot right now, but. And again, Ken or Ryu are usually my people I stuck with. I'm playing this on just a traditional six-button pad. It is a Sega pad that I featured in another it was a game pickup video. So yeah, I wish I had a joystick. I'm so used to playing this game now with joysticks because I purchased them on the Xbox Live arcade, and I have those really great sticks for 360. For the Street Fighter 4, so yeah, it's a little different playing with the pad. It's taking some getting used to, but yeah, I mean this is still a great game. I can only imagine when this came out, 93, 94 at home, maybe a little bit later, but yeah, this had to be just a completely great purchase for you, for a kid, to get paid $60 and get something that's pretty close to the arcade. I mean, graphics and speed aren't exactly there, but yeah, I mean it's a lot of game for the money, I guess, is what I'm trying to say back in the day. And that was the cool thing about Street Fighter games in general. I mean, they were always, I never, even if it was just subtle differences, I'd always, try to buy the next version of it because you just got so much gain every time for the money. And Capcom just did everything so well. It wasn't just a little gimmick like here or there. I mean, they really did redesign the game enough to where it justified it. And you wanted to play it, and you had to because everyone was talking about it. You know, if anyone that played Street Fighter, you know, they were playing the newest version. It's kind of like Call of Duty and stuff now. You know, people aren't playing, you know, Call of Duty 4 online anymore. Now it's all Call of Duty, you know, Modern Warfare 2, you know. So you kind of have to keep up with everything. Street Fighter was no different, and it was, I don't know, it's just pure nostalgia. Just looking at it, you know, knowing that this is on the Sega Genesis and everything, that it's all original hardware. I'm not gonna lie, I've had a lot of fun, you know, playing these games the past few days and everything since I've got them. It's been really cool, just a little trip down memory lane, and that's what it's all for, you know. So just a little advice to everyone out there that is getting into collecting, you know, keep games clean, keep consoles clean. I mean, even if you're not going to keep them forever, I mean, look at it that way, that maybe you're gonna, you know, sell it or pass it on to somebody that will, and they'll appreciate the fact that you did, because once these things are all gone and deteriorated and in landfills or whatever, that's it, you know, they're gone. I mean, we won't have the original hardware anymore. You'll have the code and the game and the source and everything out there, yeah, that's true, but there's something to be said about sitting here with a Sega Genesis pad and looking at a Sega Genesis and playing on a big, huge TV. I would have never dreamed having something like this when I was a kid, you know, like this kind of setup. So anyway, YouTube, this was Super Street Fighter 2 for the Sega Genesis. If you know of any better versions, console versions, obviously the Super Nintendo is, you know, probably the only one that I know of, but if you know of any other versions I should be looking at for Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, definitely send me a message and let me know. I'll pick them up. Later, YouTube.
Yeah, believe it or not, Super Street Fighter 2 here for Sega Genesis clocks in at over 40 meg. It's the largest licensed Sega Genesis game out there. In fact, I don't know of any licensed Super Nintendo games that went over 32 megs. So this is it. This is the largest memory-wise game for your Sega. Sadly, you're barely gonna notice it. Does that mean there's more characters here to the Super Nintendo game? No. Does that mean there's more levels or more exclusive content? Not really. We pretty much get all the extra goodies like the tournament mode, challenge. You know, you can go for like a high score or best time trial, but honestly, there's no save feature in the game, so it's not very important. Yeah. You get the typical group and versus battle. Good for multiplayer battles, but who really cares? And I highly recommend that you play this on the 6-button controller. Thankfully, they're like $2 a dozen. Alright, so improvements to the roster is that we get 4 new characters here. Down here, T-Hawk, yeah, big Mexican dude, pretty long, Bruce Lee stereotype, DJ, Jamaican dude, and Cammy. For fan service reasons, we'll pick Cammy. Oddly enough, Cammy became the most popular new challenger of the 4. Gee, I wonder why. Yeah, why is this girl wearing a one-piece bathing suit? This is a life or death tournament where weapons are legal. Put some pants on, you stupid girl. You gotta love how she shows her butt. Yeah, so it's a beautiful looking game still. Like, look at Hong Kong here. It's awesome. And here lies the problem with some of these new characters here, is that they just have recycled moves. Yeah, her thrust kick here is pretty much just modified. You know, Dragon Punch, Fei Lon's kick, his flame kick is pretty much a modified version of a flash kick, and all that. It's hardly anything original at all, really. T-Hawk, you know, he's like Zangief. He has like a 360-degree giant throw, which does a ton of damage. These new characters here are cool to try out, but it gets very old very quickly. A lot of the returning characters have at least one special move or singular move to them. It's
cool when you get a combo and all that. It actually recognizes it and you get bonus points, but still there's no save feature, so who really cares about the points? Turn off the game, it erases everything. Yeah, thankfully the 4 bosses have been given extra animations. Okay, so here's the fight with Vega or Balrog. It's pretty much the same fight. They recolored the stage a little bit, it looks a bit greener. And you actually see the cage fall down from the sky, which is awesome, but it's still pretty much the same fight you fought before. Yeah, the music in here just sounds terrible. It's cool, certain characters have new screens as well. Before, if you beat up a guy, they would all have the same scream. And Bison sounds kind of like a robot. And Vega just sounds all weird. Yeah, the Japanese love their feminine male characters. The only thing different about Guile now is that he has a dorky voice. Sack boom! Sack boom! Go go gadget, sack boom! Ooh ah, ooh ah. The problem is, there's no new bosses in the game. It just feels so familiar. And look at this, I'm finding Sega again after finding Vega. Big surprise. It looks exactly the same. If you played Special Championship Edition, this is pretty much the ending that you got. Okay, the graphics looked a bit more touched up, but who really cares? Yeah, it's cool that the bosses have legitimate endings now. But they're so inconsequential that you won't even care really. I like how the soundtrack, it doesn't stop in between rounds. That's a cool improvement from the Super Nintendo game. Sadly, with the Super Nintendo game, there's better colors, better voice samples. Look, if you're looking for a good one-on-one fighter for your Sega Genesis, you can't go wrong with this game. Lots of action, lots of characters to pick from. Great range of moves per character. It's good, but it's just so familiar. Yeah, I don't want to knock this game too much because it's still fun. But the problem is, I've done this so many times before. Look, I played the one on the PC engine, and I played the versions on the Super Nintendo. I played Special Championship Edition on the Sega Genesis. And no, this wasn't a budget title either. Yeah, even though the game just has a few modifications from Special Championship Edition, it doesn't matter. The game was still at full price back then. So that means it was like $60, $70. And because the game was like 40 megs, you better believe it wasn't cheap here in Canada. So you just get 4 unsighted new characters. You get a few new moves for the older ones. But everything else is pretty much the same. I give Super Street Fighter 2 here for Sega Genesis a 65 out of 100. Sure, this is only the second Street Fighter 2 game here for Sega Genesis, so I couldn't give it a few mercy points, but honestly, I'm so sick of Street Fighter by this point.
Super Street Fighter 2. If you watch the channel, you know we have a review of Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. So this is the sequel to Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition, Super Street Fighter 2. So I am going to hit the lights, and we are going to get to some reviewing fun right now. You want to do it? Ooh, thank you. Turn them off, buddy. All right, good deal. The new challengers. Alright. So, for the purposes of this review, let's pump the difficulty down a bit. And this game features, as you will see, not only a new opening, but some new characters and new artwork for the character portraits. Well, who do we have here? We have T-Hawk, we have Fei Long, we have DJ, and we have Cammy, who's everyone's favorite. So, let's be Cammy. Mexico, yeah. So, there, you'll notice there will be more effects, buddy. Let's don't block the camera, okay? Extremely colorful levels, and the smooth gameplay of its predecessor is maintained. You want to play? Alright, Daddy won the first round. You see if you can win the second round. We got a new SCART cable that works on C-Sync. So the picture is incredibly perfect right now. Hopefully you can appreciate that on the good old video monitor. So Santino is playing a strategic game of chess here. Again, very nice detailed backgrounds here, and very nice music. You're doing pretty good, buddy. Stay on it, buddy. There we go. Kick, kick, kick. Santino's trying to lure him in a corner. Oh, can Daddy try? Oh, you just barely lost.
I do it.
Let me do this round. I don't know if I can do much better, but we'll see. T-Hawk is always giving me problems, personally. Now, this game, despite being Super Street Fighter 2, did not introduce super moves. That would be Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo that introduced super moves. This game is just super cool because it's got super cool new characters, which did appear in the very nice Street Fighter the movie by Jean-Claude Van Damme. And now we are going to fight Fei Long, who bears a striking resemblance to Bruce Lee. You want to play this round? Okay, Santino's got the controller. I always like the music in this level. Again, incredibly colorful, beautiful, and energetic level here, with some pulse-pounding music. I actually have a bunch of Bruce Lee clone movies, like Dragon Lee, Bruce Lee, all them, and some of them are quite good. And I personally like the Bruce Lee, who spells his name Bruce L-E. In fact, I think his Game of Death is better than the Game of Death that was officially released under Bruce Lee. Like, not better than the... not better than what Game of Death would have been, because I've seen... Can I play? Let me just help you out here. Okay. It's not better than the Game of Death that was in development, but when Bruce Lee died, they just made a really crappy pieced together version of what he had going, so not doing well. Come on. Got him. Alright. Turning heel. Alright, Cammy. One more round.
I do it.
You want to do this round? Alright, it's your turn. Nice work. Good, buddy. Santino's playing it defensively. Keep going, you're doing really well. One more. Go. Shoot. Come on, buddy, you got this. Kick, 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 kick. Kick him. Buddy, you got one shot left. Kick him. Kick, kick. Oh, buddy, you were so close. You really just barely lost. You had like half a hit and he would have been knocked out.
Is he knocked out?
Yeah. All right, let Daddy. Okay, so we saw Cammy. Why don't we check out an old favorite right now, Blanca. Now, I was always something of an aficionado. Next round, buddy. We'll take turns. I was always something of a aficionado with Blanca. I always had like really good timing with his fierce drop kick and fierce kick. He's pretty good at getting out of the way of it. That'll do it. Oh, oh, oh. Santino's turn. So, obviously, if you have played Street Fighter, you know this. But if you don't know, and this is your first time looking at a Street Fighter game, Street Fighter works on a 3-punch and 3-kick fighting system of jab, normal punch, and fierce attack, and light kick, normal kick, fierce kick. And different moves can be added to those by sweeping the D-pad in different directions. You're done? Okay, alright. Well, it's Daddy's turn now. Daddy's turn. What was Daddy's turn? Hang on, buddy. Let Daddy play. I know, but hold on. I'll let you play the next round. Alright, you really want to do this round? Alright, let me try to get you in that. Oh, we paused it. Actually, now that we paused it, take a look at this really cool facial detail we have going on Blanca. Down from his eyes bugging out to his tongue sticking out. Very, very good. Sega Genesis, especially on the 32X, can just look fantastic. Alright, you got it, buddy. Don't hit start. You gotta hit the buttons. Oh man, go. That's a good kick to work right there, buddy. See, Blanca, with him, he's a little slower, so you have to be very strategic with his fierce attacks, or else there's going to be openings. And then fast players like Fei Long will get you. You just barely lost. All right, buddy. Well, you know who we need to be right now. Ryu. If you've seen the Street Fighter, the animated movie, there is a great scene where Ryu and Fei Long fight in an underground fight club. So, as always, with Ryu, if you like hold back and then sweep it forward, perfect, you'll do a fireball that will set the guy on fire. Good stuff. Be careful of the Christmas tree, buddy. We have a blue Christmas tree with Super Nintendo and Minnesota Vikings stuff up in the game room. Alright, 2 perfects in a row. You win. Perfect. We won. That is a Super Mario Christmas ornament. And this guy must defeat Shenlong to stand a chance. Also known as his Dragon Punch. Alright, so we'll do one more fight. We'll do DJ here. Inspired by the one and only Billy Blanks. I am super serious. If you don't believe me, come and take a look. Knockout. I actually like the Street Fighter live-action movie as an alternate dimension telling of the Street Fighter game. The guy they cast as DJ was horrendous, though. Not that I don't like him as a person or anything, he just looked nothing like DJ. They just got some skinny black guy, and they're like, hey, here's DJ. And it's like, no, that is not DJ. He's supposed to be like Billy Blanks, not just some random guy with a fade, you know? Like, not cool. Alright, now my favorite thing to do when I got the guy in the ropes is to chuck him. Like that. And now I know I said that was going to be our last fight, but since we're having so much fun and we're on a roll, let's do another one. These people doing dancing in the background. I really love the positive cultural stereotypes in Street Fighter. Ooh, we're going to break the car. Now, whenever we break a car on Street Fighter and I'm Ryu, I always like to do the axe kick, because that tends to get you a lot of bang for your buck. Or a lot of smash for your button push, if that is a more accurate statement. Perfect. Alright, who are we fighting now? Oh, it's Blanca. So now we're on the other side of the equation. Now we are fighting Blanca rather than playing as Blanca. Music does sound different, not worse by any means, or even better, just different than in Champion Edition. I mean, it's definitely the same song, just different notes are emphasized in different ways. Attack patterns are also different. Shoot. Alright, we got him. I really can't stress enough how good this looks with this new C-Sync SCART cable. Just incredibly perfect picture. Going through this professional video monitor. Brought to us by the fine people at JVC. Or as they're known in Japan on occasion, Victor. Whoa, good job. Well, we're going to be Blanca right here, and then we're going to wrap up our very cool review of this very cool game. Alright. Nothing like hearing that guy say perfect at the end of You Win.